Welcome to the Priva Compass Certified Basic Engineer tutorial. This is a continuation of the Compass hardware tutorial. If you have not gone through that module yet, please do so before starting this module. This module covers the software installation and setup of the Priva Compass. In this module, we will discuss connecting to the Compass gateway, updating the gateway software, creating a PIN code and username, setting up the gateway, downloading software to the controllers, licensing controllers, assigning individual inputs and outputs, application settings, diagnostics, uploading the compatibility packages to the gateway, and finally starting operator for the first time. The first step will cover connecting your personal computer, laptop, tablet, or mobile phone to the Priva Compass gateway. This training module assumes that you already have IT and network setup knowledge. You will remember from our Compass hardware tutorial that the gateway can be found on the door of the Compass 2S or 4S panel. Remember that LAN port 1 on the gateway is reserved for the office network, and this is the port you will use now. To connect to your Compass, you will need some sort of device that has an internet browser. This can be a personal computer, a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile phone. There are 4 different methods that you can connect to your Priva Compass. We will briefly review all 4. For the exact details on connecting to the Priva Compass, you will need to check out the article, How Do I Connect to My Compass System to My PC, Laptop, Tablet, or Phone, in the Installing Your Hardware section of the Priva Help Center at support.priva.com. The demonstration is based on the default settings in the gateway. If this is not a new installation, someone may have changed these settings, and this information may not be accurate. One option is to connect a PC or a laptop directly to the Compass. This is suitable if the Compass is located in an area where there is no office network. You will need to set a static IP address on your PC or laptop. Newer gateways will always have the IP address of 172.16.1.1 assigned to LAN port 1. For your laptop or PC, set a static IP address of 172.16.1.100 so that it will be in the same network range as the Compass. Once the Ethernet connection is completed, you can enter http://172.16.1.1 in your browser window to establish a connection with the Compass. It is also possible to connect to the Compass via Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi option is not recommended for continuous use, but only as a temporary or backup method until you can establish a wired connection. Since the Wi-Fi dongle is inside the Compass panel, the range is extremely low. In most installations, the Compass will be connected to an office network via a router. This allows access to the Compass via any PC in the network. You will be able to access the gateway either by name or by IP address. In some installations, you may have multiple routers. You should note that depending on how the network is set up, you may not be able to access the gateway by name. In that case, you will need to enter the IP address in the browser to connect to the gateway. Some of you may have noticed that the cloud connection is not mentioned as a method of connecting to the Compass. That is because the purpose of this tutorial is to connect to the Compass for the purpose of setting it up. The cloud connection to the Compass gives the grower access to the Compass from anywhere, but it does not have the capability of accessing the setup and configuration screens. Once you have made the physical connection to the Priva Compass, you can access it by entering the name or IP address in your browser. If this is the first time anyone has connected to this Priva Compass, you will see the welcome screen of the gateway setup. If someone has already set up the Priva Compass, you will see the operator screen homepage. Once you have made the connection to the gateway, the next step is to make sure it has the latest software version installed. You can download the latest updates from Priva's Help Center, which is found at support.priva.com. Take some time to browse through the Priva Compass section of the Help Center. You will find many resources for installation and operation of your Priva Compass. You will also find that many of the subjects discussed in this tutorial are covered in greater detail in our Help Center. For now, you want to make sure you download the latest software files. Go to the Compass page of the Help Center and refer to the article, Where Can I Find the Latest Priva Compass Software?, found in the Update Your Software to the Latest Release section. Once you have found the article, open the page and download the gateway and controller update files. Later, you will be uploading them to the gateway and the controllers. If you saw the welcome screen when you first connected, you can now click on the Select Update file and update the gateway to the latest release using the file you just downloaded. If you saw a different screen, it means that someone has already installed an update in this gateway. That's okay, we will show another way of updating the software later. Once the update is completed and the gateway is at the latest release, the next step is to create a PIN code and a username. If this is a new setup, the PIN code screen will appear next. The PIN code is used so only the installer has access to the gateway and controller setup pages. This is a different access method than the username and password that are used by the grower for normal operation. This PIN code gives you access to the gateway setup screens. Make sure you write down the PIN code in a safe place. Next, you will be prompted to enter a username. This username is for the growers who will be using the Compass regularly and needs to be in an email format. The growers will also have a password that they will use to log in. You will not be asked for this password. The gateway will assign a temporary password for the grower. This temporary password is the same as the username. For instance, if you enter meatmygreenhouse.com as a username, the first time someone logs in, they will need to enter meatmygreenhouse.com as a username and also use meatmygreenhouse.com as a password. They will then be asked to change the password. Once you enter the username, click on the Create User button to create the user. Now we will start setting up the gateway. Let's have a look at our Gateway Setup app. To enter the Gateway Setup app from the local operator, you can click on the person icon in the top right corner of the screen and then select the Gateway Setup app from the list. Alternately, you can type in Grows Setup at the end of your URL. Let's review our Gateway Setup screen. We will start with the Settings tab. The Gateway Setup app shows us the current version of the gateway. You can check on setup.priva.com to see if this is the latest version, and, if not, you can click on the Update Package button to bring the gateway to the latest version. It also shows us all the Compass controllers the gateway has found in the network. We will look at them in a bit, but first, we will review the rest of the gateway configuration settings. We can change the general settings of the gateway. The gateway name can be used in the URL instead of an IP address. Make sure that this name is unique in your office network. The time zone needs to correspond to your local time zone. We can set the date and time here as well. However, if the gateway is connected to the internet, the date and time will be automatically synchronized with the internet time. Clicking on the Advanced text gives us some more maintenance options. Here we can change the PIN code or the username. We can make backups of certain settings in the gateway, such as the new names of renamed zones. This will also include the last 2 weeks of historical data, but does not include the settings within your Compass controllers. We will cover how to back up individual controllers a little later in this tutorial. There is also the ability to clear your operator cache files. You can use this to rebuild your operator screens if one does not appear properly. You can also download log files, check operator versions, or reboot a gateway if instructed to do so by a Priva technician. We also have a separate Network tab that lets us set up the IP addresses of the gateway. The Preferences tab allows us to set the units preferred by the grower. Note that these preferences are only for the local operator. The cloud operator has options to set these preferences per user in the cloud. The language selection sets the language that the local operator is shown in. Note that this will only work if the grower's browser settings are set in that language as well. For instance, if you choose your local fallback language as Swedish, it will only show Swedish text if the browser settings are also set for Swedish. If the browser settings are set to Finnish, for example, the local operator will go back to its default language of English. The Cloud tab allows you to connect your Compass to the cloud. We will not be covering that in this tutorial. You will get more details about this as you set up your Priva connected package. Going back to the Settings tab, we will now start to set up the controllers that are connected to the gateway. We can see here that 2 controllers have been discovered on the Priva network. If this is a new system, we need to download the software to the controllers. This needs to be done if the controllers are brand new and are at the factory defaults. Click on the Update Device button on the controller icon to enter the controller setup screen. The controller starts up with a random IP address. We will need to set the controller to the same address range as the gateway. Click on the pencil to the right of the IP address to change it. You can manually enter an IP address, but the quickest way to set this up is to click on the Auto Assign button to automatically set an IP address within the proper range. The controller will need to update its network settings and reboot after you change the IP address, so this will take a few moments. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for the reconnection to be made after rebooting. If you get an error message that the controller cannot be reached at this IP address, try refreshing your browser window. Once the IP address has been set, you are ready to load software into the controller. Click on the Upload Platform Image button. Select the Compass controller setup file that you downloaded from the Help Center as described at the beginning of this tutorial. A confirmation screen will appear verifying that you wish to update. Click on Confirm to begin the update. It will take several minutes for the update to complete and the controller to restart with the new software. Once the software is loaded and running in the controller, you can set up the licenses for the controller. In this tutorial, we will not be covering how the software licenses are set up. To find out information about that, go to Priva's Help Center found at support.priva.com and refer to the article, How Do Licenses Work on the Compass? To prepare the Compass for the licenses, we will need to set up the zones. Select the Zones tab, click on the Add Zone button to add zones and click on the Select an Option button to modify the zone numbers. For this tutorial, we will set up 3 zones and call them Zones 11, 12, and 100. You can see that the zones do not need to be sequential, so you can number your zones in a way that makes sense to you. Remember that each zone number must be unique in the Compass network. Once you are done, click on the Save button. Now click on the Software tab. Here we can enter our license key. This license key is generated in Priva's web production site. Contact your account manager for more information on how to sign up to this site. Once you have entered the license key, click on the Submit button. Once the license key is validated against the serial number, the display will show a summary of the license on the left of the screen. Here we can see the serial number of the controller as well as the license key. The key has been decoded, and we can see that this license key contains licenses for 2 advanced climate zones, 2 advanced irrigation zones, 2 advanced photosynthesis zones, and 1 enterprise water system. On the right side of the screen, we can map the licenses. Here we see the zones that we can apply the licenses to. Applying the licenses is done by selecting the proper buttons and saving them. In this layout, we have applied the climate, irrigation, and photosynthesis licenses to zones 11 and 12, and have applied the water system license to zone 100. Licenses can be moved from zone to zone, but only if there are no inputs or outputs set. For instance, right now we can move the water supply license from zone 100 to zone 12. But if we had assigned the water system pump in zone 100, we would need to unassign that output before we can move the license. Now that we have set up the license, we can assign the inputs and outputs. To go to the Input and Output Configuration page, click on the I/O Connection tab. On the left side of the screen, we find the module configuration. In this example, it has detected that there is a CMX34 and an MX34 present in the Compass. You will see that there is a small exclamation point on the modules with the word New underneath it. The system is waiting for you to confirm that this is the correct layout. If you have added UI8 modules or DOR6 modules, they should also appear here. If they do not appear, there is most likely a problem with your I/O bus wiring. Check the modules and the I/O bus to resolve the issue before you continue. Once you have confirmed that this is the correct layout, click on the Confirm button. You will only be able to assign inputs and outputs to the modules once you have confirmed the layout. Also, once you have confirmed the layout and started assigning the inputs and outputs, it is more work to move them, so it is imperative that you have the correct layout before you start. Once you have confirmed the layout, the Confirm button will disappear. If you add an extra module later on, you will need to repeat this procedure. Here we are adding a DOR6 module. The DOR6 module gets flagged because it is new, but the MX34 module also gets flagged because it is being moved to a different position in the lineup. Once you click on the Confirm button, you will need to check all the inputs and outputs that used to be on the MX34 module since the location of them will have changed. We are now ready to assign the inputs and outputs to the modules. There are 3 areas where we will be concentrating on. The first area is where we select which input or output we want to assign. The second area is where we select which module and channel we want to assign the input or output to. And the third area shows a list of the inputs and outputs that have already been assigned. You will remember from the Compass hardware presentation that we mentioned that the alarm buzzer output was pre-configured to the first analog output of the CMX34. Here you can see the buzzer output has been programmed and is already on the list. We will now program some inputs and outputs. First, we need to select which zone we want to start with. In this case, we will click on Zone 11 to select it. When we click on the Sensor Actuator list, we will get a drop-down list of all the available sensors and actuators in Zone 11. Remember that we earlier applied the climate, irrigation, and photosynthesis licenses to Zone 11? Now we can see that the drop-down list includes field devices from the climate, irrigation, and photosynthesis controls but does not include field devices from the water room and energy room controls. If we change the licenses, the list of items in the drop-down list will change. For instance, if we change the climate license from the advanced level to the enterprise level, we will get more field devices in the drop-down list. If you are looking for a specific sensor, you can start typing the name in, and it will search for the sensor for you. Let's start by selecting Air Temperature Sensor 1 from the drop-down list. We can have up to 4 air temperature sensors within a climate zone. If we only want one air temperature sensor, this is the one we select. Once we select the air temperature sensor, we can choose which type of air temperature sensor we will be using. The types are dependent on the sensor selected. For instance, if you are assigning a CO2 sensor, the list of sensor types will include different types of CO2 sensors. In this case, we will be using the standard Priva temperature sensor, which is an NTC thermistor that measures 3000 ohms at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, you set the location that you want the input to be assigned to. By default, the Compass picks the first available input, but you can change it if you want. Once you have selected the desired location, click the Assign button. Once assigned, the input will appear on the list of I/O connections together with the location of the input. If you wish to delete the sensor, you can click on the garbage can icon on the right of the list. If you wish to move the sensor, select the new location and click the Assign button again. As you program your inputs and outputs, the connection list will grow. At the top of the list, there is a header. You can click on the individual header items to sort the list. Once you finish assigning your inputs and outputs, you can export the list into an Excel spreadsheet. This is useful if you want to bring your input and output list into a technical drawing. You can also generate a PDF file of the input and output list. Many installers print out the PDF and mount it on the inside door of the Compass panel. This proves very handy for wiring the panel during the installation phase as well as for identifying inputs or outputs when troubleshooting in the future. Before you print out the PDF, you can sort the list first by I/O channel and then by module. You can also export this list. This is useful if you are setting up multiple compasses and the inputs and outputs are identical. Once you are finished the first one, you can export the list to a file. The list then can be imported into other controllers using the Import button. Let's now have a look at the application settings of the Compass. In the upper right corner of the screen, you will find a sprocket icon. Clicking on this sprocket brings you to the Application and Diagnostic tabs. We will start with the Application tab. The Compass Setup field indicates the version of the tool that you are using right now to configure the Compass. The mains frequency needs to be set to 50 Hz or 60 Hz depending on your location. This is used to filter out electrical noise on the universal inputs. The buzzer volume allows you to set the loudness of the alarm buzzer. Each time you adjust it, the buzzer will emit a short beep so you can tell how loud that setting is. The current version of the Compass application software is also shown here. You can check on support.priva.com to see if this is the latest version. You can also check the release notes on support.priva.com to see what has changed between versions. If you wish to update to the latest release, download the version from support.priva.com and use this button to update the controller. This will need to be done for each controller in your Compass network. All the compasses in the network need to be in the same release. You can also back up your Compass input and output configuration as well as your user settings here. Backup should be done anytime you change one of the inputs or outputs. If you have changed anything in the configuration and have not made a backup, an alarm will be triggered in operator. This alarm can only be cleared by making a backup. If you are updating your Compass to a new release, make sure you make one backup before updating the Compass to a new release and make a second backup after the new release has been installed. Make sure you store the backups in a safe place accessible to everyone who will be doing maintenance on your Compass. In the unlikely event that you need to restore from a backup, it can be done here as well. If you are restoring a backup to a different controller, you will need to ensure that your controller has the proper licenses before you can restore the backup. We will also have a look at the Compass Diagnostics screen. After clicking on the sprocket icon, you can click on the Diagnostics tab to see more information. You can see the date and time of the Compass here. This is synchronized with the gateway time and cannot be changed. The uptime shows the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds since the last time the Compass was powered up. The CPU temperature indicates how hot the microprocessor is. This must be below 75 degrees Celsius or 167 degrees Fahrenheit. Note that this is the temperature of the microprocessor and not the temperature of the panel. The system log contains internal information about the application software. Like the gateway log files, you may be asked by a Priva technician to download these files. The audit log contains a list of every setting that was made in this Compass since it was first started. The audit log can be beneficial but is also somewhat cryptic. To find out more details about reading the audit log, go to support.priva.com and search for the article titled, "Can I see a history of all the settings that have been changed in my Compass?" Once you are finished with the controller setup, click on the exit icon to return to the gateway setup. Finally, we can upload the compatibility package to the gateway for the operator to use. When you come back to the gateway setup, you will notice that the controller icons have changed. The controller icons now show the zones that are configured, the controller software version, the IP addresses of the controllers, and the compatibility package version. The controllers now also have a connect button that was not there before. This indicates that the controller is ready to be connected to the gateway. Let's talk about what it means to connect a controller to the gateway. When you update the software for the Compass controller, you not only update the application software, but you also update the user interface definition. This defines the various screen texts that the grower will see in Operator. We call that a compatibility package because it makes the gateway compatible with the Compass. When we click on the Connect button, we will upload the compatibility package to the gateway, unpack it, and prepare the user screens for the gateway. There are 3 situations where you will need to send a compatibility package up to the gateway. The first situation is if you add a new controller to the gateway. The second situation is if you update a controller to a new release. The new release usually contains new or updated user interface screens, and these need to be sent to the gateway. The third situation is if you add zones or change the zone numbers in the controller. The new zones will not appear in Operator until you send the compatibility package to the gateway. After connecting the controllers to the gateway, you will notice 2 changes. The Connect button will be replaced by a Disconnect button. This will allow you to disconnect and reconnect the controller if you change the zone numbering. And finally, you will notice that the Start Operator tab in the top right corner, which has been grayed out up to this point, is finally available. You are now ready to start the local operator for the first time. There is one last thing you need to set up. Click on the Start Operator button to launch Priva Operator. Remember when we had to enter a default username but not a default password? When you get to Operator's login screen for the first time, you will need to enter the login name you chose and enter the same information in the password field. Here you can see we are entering the same information for username and the password. The operator will then prompt you to enter a new password. This brings us to the end of the Compass software installation tutorial. Thank you for joining us today.